Welcome to the RSP Cast. I'm Matt Waldman with the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. Today's episode is a solo cast on the 2025 wide receiver class. It's billed as a bad class, but is it? I'm going to discuss one or two prevailing thoughts I have about the 69 wide receivers that will be featured in the 2025 Rookie Scouting Portfolio pre-draft publication. It's going to be available for pre-order at mattwaldman.com. It's available right now for pre-order, and it's going to be available for download April 1st. You can pre-order it at mattwaldman.com. Now, if you haven't purchased the RSP in the past, it's a PDF draft guide. This year, it's covering 165 players at the offensive skill positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. It's been available for download every April 1st since 2006. Yep, 20 years. And for over a decade, I also deliver a post-draft guide 1 week after the NFL draft. That's part of the subscription price of $21.95. You're not going to get much of a better deal than this. I mean, people usually are pleasantly shocked with what they get. This is how I make my living. So if you enjoy the podcast, the YouTube channel, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call that thing, or Blue Sky, all that work I do is simply me sharing a small amount of the background research I do all year for this publication. I go deep with the RSP, and it helps you go deep with your knowledge so that you can go deep on your league mates. What I'm sharing is really low on frills and huge on substance. And new readers, like I said, they're pleasantly shocked with what they get. I'm going to share more detail about the RSP later in this podcast. Now, this is an A through Z show on wide receivers, pretty much like my previous solo pods I've done, like the tight end podcast I did last week. I'm going to be sharing one or two things about these receivers that I find notable, and I'm going to be sharing these things based on, I'm going to order the receivers alphabetically, so you're not getting them in terms of order of any ranking. These thoughts are going to fall into categories of praise, criticism, lingering questions I have, or broader thoughts about the position. These are far from complete scouted reports. If you want the full deal, again, $21.95, mattwaldman.com will get you that, and you're going to feel like you're underpaying. I'm selling you, but that's the truth of the matter here. So the original question, is this a bad wide receiver class? The answer is complicated. And I think what we need to start with is, what is a reasonable expectation for a wide receiver class? Because from what I've seen, we can estimate the average number of receivers from recent classes that qualify with at least 3 years of starter production after at least 4 years in the league is 4.5 players. So basically, if there are 4 or 5 players that come from a draft class and they have at least 3 years of production, they've been successful. And does that 3 years of production begin, that first year begin sometime within the first 4 years of them being drafted? That's basically what we're looking for, and the number is 4.5 players. It's not a lot when you consider how many receivers are drafted each year. I mean, we're talking like 25 to 30 at least in many cases. So if we roll with this sample size of 4.5 players, our expectation for this draft class is that's going to yield 4 to 5 players that earn at least 3 years of production during their first 4 seasons in the league, and a range of 4 to 6 years of starter production during the course of a career, spanning anywhere between 5 to 12 years. So if there's a lesson to learn for personnel management of wide receiver play, whether that's real personnel management or fantasy personnel management, it's that the baseline for a successful career span as an NFL receiver with starter production is between about 3.5 to 6 years. And most receivers with multiple years of starter production rarely attain top 24 or top 12 production, averaging less than a year of this caliber of work during their career. So while we should expect top wide receiver prospects to possess traits, skills, or potential to match the likes of, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Brian Thomas, A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, we should probably maintain the perspective that the odds are stacked against them. It means that bringing in a new influx of talent at the position as often as possible is going to be the wise approach. Now, a personnel manager's job is to supply the team with the best talent available to win games, and in theory, let the coaches and players execute their roles. Whether the person reading this is dealing with the realities of football or they're in a fantasy league, wide receivers should be in play for a team's draft every year because few of them deliver multiple years of consecutive starter production. So if all the ranges of years I was talking about in average was a little confusing as I was trying to explain it, just underscore this point is that few receivers deliver multiple years of consecutive starter production. So you want to keep that influx in there. So if you're a draft nick or media analyst, just understand that talent is only one of the many drivers of opportunity in the NFL. Now, fans will be emotional about picks that succeed and fail, and they'll credit talent or lack thereof as the reasons why. They're not considering the other factors that have equal or greater influence. If you're a scout, you already know this better than me. So now that we understand kind of the true realities of what happens to prospects, let's go back to what we're actually doing, which is judging the value of the 2025 wide receiver class. I'll say this. If your criteria for judging this class is the number of prospects who the herd has told you have a strong shot of becoming primary receivers, then the going perception of this class is that it's a bad one. I mean, frankly, there are just not a lot of options who project as that timing route runner with big play ability who can win against the opponent's top cornerback when everyone in the stadium knows the ball's coming to him. Now, if your criteria is the number of prospects with the skills to offer starter production as the primary, secondary, or tertiary threat, it's not so bad of a class. I mean, after all, I just told you a reasonable expectation for a wide receiver class is it for it to yield 4 to 5 players who become starters within their first 4 seasons in the NFL and then deliver at least 3 years of starter production at that point. Now, does this class have the talent to reach these marks? Hell yeah, it does. It may or may not have the star power and top-end statistical production of recent classes, but I'm optimistic we're going to see 4 to 5 receivers from the 2025 class deliver 3 years of starter production at some point during their careers. The complicating factor about this class, and possibly more so than even recent classes, is, determining who those players are going to be. But why is it more complicated? That's the crux of it. Well, from what I've been observing is that over the past 3 seasons, I've seen a rise in scores in the RSP among prospects. And the RSP's process hasn't changed in recent years. I'm still using the same iteration. I'm not getting soft either. I'm not just handing these out. In fact, the rise in scores are proportionate to the tiers. I'm not giving away starter and franchise tier scores, the 2 highest scores. The fact of the matter is that the contributor and rotational tiers, the 2 next tiers below starter, these are players who can come off the bench and contribute at varying levels of success based on how their role is matched to their talents. Those tiers have grown substantially, and the number of players who are in it. Now, the rise of 7-on-7 football, flag football, year-round private wide receiver coaches, wide receiver camps, all these things at the lower levels of football have led to receivers becoming more technically sound than ever before. Now, these prospects are entering the league with a broader knowledge base of release maneuvers, manipulation techniques with stems and setups, and experience with various types of breaks. It just means that the baseline knowledge of wide receiver play has increased. And yes, I have been giving more top-end grades to prospects over the past 3 years, but as I've said, it's proportionate to the number of receivers earning grades in the lower tiers. So for every player I'm giving a high-end grade to, there are 3 to 5 more receivers who are getting assigned to those 2 to 3 tiers that are kind of the middle of the bell curve. So these are tiers these are the tiers where the places that you're going to see receivers who have enough skills to contribute, but they're missing just enough from their games to become reliable starters. And that's been where the steady increase of players has really occurred over the past 2 to 3 years. Now, the question you might have is, if receivers are requiring more skills than ever, why are so many of them not ready for prime time and might never be, and they're in tiers that reflect that? And it's a good question, and it's an easy answer. One is, as the bar for competency rises, well, so does the bar for excellence. I mean, after all, the limits on available jobs in the NFL remains the same. That's been constant. And two, there's a difference between having skills and being skilled. It's like having tools in a toolbox that can help you perform a variety of skills, and being a master craftsman where you can do things with a hammer better than some people can do things with a screwdriver. Okay, and that it usually calls for a screwdriver. I mean, things like that. So anyway, I'm not a carpenter. My wife is. You're going to hear the saw in the background probably, and she'll probably tell me that what I just explained was nonsensical. But that's all right. I'm studying wide receivers. So anyway, some of the I'll give you a good example of being skilled versus having skills. You know, some of my longtime professional musician friends have shared cautionary tales in recent years about musicians on Instagram. There's a lot of massive talents on Instagram. I mean, great pros, great recording artists. But there are also folks who are very skilled, and they perform solo pieces, or they're playing riffs, or they're doing some sort of excerpt of something, and they're playing it on social media, and they have tremendous technique. You know, their sound is great. They have a great sense of time for what it is they're performing. But that looks great. But for, you know, veteran musicians, they know that that's a whole different thing than playing well with other musicians. And they have found that some of these IG musicians aren't gaining this kind of experience. So they have skills, but they're not always skilled. They're, you know, playing with people is a different thing than just playing alone. And wide receivers have learned all these techniques. They've acquired all these skills, oftentimes working alone or working in settings that are not really playing with others to the scope that you do when you play football. But they aren't skilled at integrating these techniques into coherent language that tells a story that a defensive back believes. They're not skilled at knowing which techniques to use at the right time, and they aren't skilled yet at working with a quarterback in the moment to adjust to defensive disguises or reactions. Some of them are going to have, some receivers who I just described may have some of these things, but not all of these things. There's, you know, they have skills and they're maybe only partially skilled, or they have lots of skills and aren't skilled at all. And then some of the better ones have skills and they are skilled. So, but most of them are in that camp of it's not fully there yet. So, you know, it's just proportionate. The proportionate view sitting atop the board with many, you know, sit on the top of the board, and then there's a great middle right now in that prospect bell curve. Now, there are 38 players in this class that I believe have compelling talent that we're going to have to monitor over the years. Last year, I had that number at 25. The year before that, it was 22. So you can see the rise that's been happening here. And I'm basing these numbers on the amount of prospects who've earned at least a score of 80 on the RSP's depth of talent scoring system. So a rotational starter who sees a lot of playing time every week and earns enough time, you know, earns enough targets to be productive. That's where 80 is the starting point for that tier of rotational starter. You know, and I just want to explain why I'm scoring players higher more often in recent years. I mean, I wanted to explain that. I wanted you to know why I'm scoring players higher than 79.5, in recent years. Now, there's more to it. Fit's a vital part of the equation for every position, even more so for wide receivers. NFL teams like fantasy owners are generally all over the board in rating receiver prospects. It's the ultimate scheme-based position. There are talents who transcend scheme, but they're the players who are capable of a lot more or a lot less. There are players who transcend scheme, but there are also players who are capable of doing a lot more or a lot less based on how their talents are deployed. Jamar Chase could play anywhere. And then you look at someone like, how would I best put it? Drake London. Drake London can't play every position. And you could see that he was much better last year as a big slot. So there's some things to say about it. I still think he's a very good player, but he's not Jamar Chase. Different type of guy. So application of talent and skill, is are big factors. So there are receivers in the NFL that only do a select number of things, but they do them so well that defenses have trouble stopping them. Looking at it from that standpoint, we often have trouble appreciating the difference between all of the skills that can be demanded of a wide receiver from a broad and generic perspective, and which skills and traits are needed for a specific role. This is especially true when accounting for a player's role in a specific offense. It's really vital to understand this about the position. So in contrast to many positions on the football field, there are significantly different types of wide receiver talents that can be successful in the NFL. One can have a broad range of skills and traits if he at least possesses a minimal depth of competency in these key areas. And these are key areas that may not be the same from scheme to scheme. Another receiver can have a bunch of smaller ranges of skills and talents, but his talent in those areas really runs deep. So this year, I think there's 4 to 6 talents with instant impact potential if they find the right landing spot. And I think there's 2 or 3 more with the talent to make the impact even if the team fit is suboptimal. One of them, Travis Hunter, probably might end up being a part-time gadget player in this offense and play the bulk of his snaps at cornerback, which means if you hastily judge the fantasy value of the class after 1 year, this is automatically going to look like a below-average year for the position. So to me, I would say the wise approach isn't to write off this class long-term. If you're trying to rebuild a team with multiple early-round draft picks, well then yes, this would be a good year to trade your picks for earlier picks in 26 and 27. I have more recommendations based on different team builds and strategies that you can find in the 2025 RSP. Now, with that RSP publication, for $21.95, you're going to get the most comprehensive look at skill positions available to the general public. What you get when you download it on April 1st is a PDF. It's fully bookmarked, contains information that my subscribers have learned is pretty evergreen, multiple years of value, and even more valuable than the post-draft, which I find for newbies is usually in high demand. In what you're going to get are rankings in cheat sheet format. You're going to get discussion about those rankings in prose format. You're going to get detailed profiles breaking down all the criteria that I use to scout each position. The guide, I basically guide you through my defined and weighted criteria so you can gain an entertaining understanding of my evaluation process and how all the pieces make the whole of each scouting report. There's analysis of recent draft trends at each position and what I think is changing with how the league assesses these positions. We just spent time doing some of that I basically shared from the wide receiver chapter of the RSP that you'll see this year. There's a range of stylistic comparisons for each prospect. There's a minimum of 150 prospects in the pre-draft. This year it's going to be over 160. Rankings from my past 3 years of classes updated multiple times during the season, and then a post-draft guide that's part of the purchase, and that's available no later than a week after the draft, and it gives you great fantasy analysis rooted in football scouting that I did in the pre-draft publication. So you're going to get ADP tracking from multiple leagues. You're going to get updated rankings and a tiered cheat sheet with sweet spot values. And these values are basically a number that gives you an indication of what my evaluation of the player is, or how I value the player, and what his post-draft ADP is, and where you can pick him so that you're getting the value that I think he is, while not overpicking or waiting to, not reaching or waiting too late and not getting him. So, for instance, for years, a good example that I gave was either Lamar or Patrick Mahomes or Nick Chubb, where I would say, look, these are some of the best 2 to 3 players in the draft. Some of them aren't going to the end of the first round or the end of the second round. You can wait a certain amount of time to get them, and here's the point where you're going to want to get them before it's likely that someone is going to be able to snipe them from you. And I give you a shorthand of where that works on a cheat sheet. You get fit analysis, depth chart analysis, where I show you the veterans and how many years they have left on their deals, and talk about how I see that evolving. And you get a monthly newsletter with scouting reports and analysis of current and future prospects. All of that for $21.95 at www.mattwaldman.com. I've been doing this now for 20 years. 20 years. So, I miss on players. I have different viewpoints on players than most of my peers. Sometimes that gets you the Lamar Jacksons and the Patrick Mahomes of the world, and the Nick Chubbs, or going further back, Isaiah Crowell being a number 1 guy on my board that year, at who was a UDFA. I'm going to take chances like that, not because I'm trying to be different. It's just because my process is unique. And as a result of that process, I'm not following what, people who talk to agents or NFL scouts follow. I'm not trying to predict the draft. You're not going to see me doing mock drafts. I'm just trying to value talent outside of the narratives of the media or what is being fed to the media. Okay, you can get that elsewhere, and it's valuable. But if you want a fresh look at players based on skill sets, then you're not going to find things like this around easily. I'll say that. So anyway, for those of you wondering how I study talent when I watch a player, I often chart 1 to 2 games in the summer of them, another 1 to 2 in the fall, and then another 1 or 2 more in the winter. And then I look at my notes and I create a hit list of items that I think I need to watch again, or find additional evidence, or just kind of clarify what it is that I'm seeing or not seeing. And then I look at more film for players that way, just really like focusing in on those points. And I also look at the metrics from the combine, and I look and see if things match up from that standpoint. And oftentimes they do, sometimes they don't, and usually there's a way to be able to explain that as to whether the workout was better than how the player actually expresses those skills on the field, or that the player expresses the skills on the field as a football player better than how they worked out. Again, sometimes those workouts, you're studying to the test as opposed to trying to become a better football player. Now, I don't specifically chart every game beyond the 3 to 6 that you're often seeing in my notes, but I do watch almost every rep of at least the latest season from most players. Okay, so let's get started. That's a long wind-up, I know, but I also think it's important to give you context about the receiver class and give you some ideas about how things were changing. So let's do A to Z by first name. Arkansas's Andrew Armstrong. He's a skilled pass catcher. He wins over the middle. He wins with his back to the quarterback, up the rails against tight coverage. He has sharp and flat breaks back to the quarterback. This is a possession-plus style of receiver who can win after the catch, as well as good length and height, and his long speed was better than people expected. Antwain Wells, Juice Wells. Wells is a good runner after the catch. He thrives on routes against zone coverage, and I don't think there's any reason to believe that Wells can't develop the elements to become a better route runner against man-to-man. He's got that one long, three quick break. He's just got to cultivate a little more weight drop for a sudden break, but he's shown that he can execute that weight drop with sharpness on routes like intermediate curls. So this, Ole Miss product by way of South Carolina, interesting player. He's got, with short in cuts, he's got the sharp line step, but he uses two small steps for his break and drive steps that aren't quite flat enough or sharp enough for a tight, efficient turn. There's just enough lapses with his routes that he needs to continue to working on it so that he become the receiver that he's capable of being, or at least the route runner. Arian Smith, University of Georgia. Now, if Smith's hands were more reliable, he'd have a borderline starter grade in the RSP. The potential good news for that is that Smith only has really one issue with his hands techniques, and that's his hands get too wide at the point of attack when he extends his arms to the ball. And this leads to clap attacks where Smith either fights the ball or the ball flies between his hands and he just completely misses the target. Now, when Smith's hands are close enough to win the ball, he's capable of acrobatic adjustments, high, low, or away from his frame, and he can do it against tight coverage and hits. So right now, Smith's kind of a frustrating player for fans because they see the game changer he can be when things are going right. I mean, he's a breakaway speedster with vision, agility, and functional power for his size. But when a receiver drops a deep pass, especially when they're open or nearly make a tough play that should have been caught, the disappointment factor for fans has more psychological gravity than dropping most short and intermediate passes. So my theory is that most deep passes can change the game while few short and intermediate targets have that kind of gravitas. The potential good news is that Smith only has that one issue with his hands. It should be easier for him to correct it. He doesn't have a tracking problem. Quentin Johnston has had a tracking problem with certain plays. Arian Smith doesn't. His choices of how to attack the ball are also sound, and he doesn't have any focus drops that really plague his game. It's just that one area with his hands being too far apart. He can work on that. Bo Collins, Notre Dame. Now, look, he's got effective pullback technique, which is, when you catch the ball, pulling your body away so you get your back to the defender and shield him from the ball. He does this well when executing a jump up and through, which is a positional technique you see where players, on back shoulder fades or underthrown balls, high point the ball. But there's more to it than just high pointing. It's knowing when to stop based on the trajectory of the ball so that you allow the defender to overrun you or to cut him off. Get positioned to where you can make a leap where you're leaping straight up and down or towards the ball. And with Collins, what you find is that his jump up and through is about 1 to 2 steps late, and it forces him, when you're late and the ball's arriving high, then that means the ball's going to be arriving past you if you're late. If you're early with your leap, you're going to be leaping as the ball arrives to you. And that means that you're not leaning back. But when you're late, you're leaning away from the ball, and you now are putting yourself in position where your legs are going to be out of control. You're going to be opening up your chest and your torso and your hands to the defender who you're supposed to be positioning yourself against with this technique. He also drifts in another way, and that's intermediate speed breaks. His drive step's flat. That's the first step out of the turn. His line step, the second one, isn't flat, and he drifts 3 to 4 yards out of the break step. So when the coverage over the top is clearly tight enough to threaten the target, Collins is better with these drive and line steps. But sometimes when he beats guys who are playing trail coverage, he isn't executing these breaks as sharp, and those trail defenders can undercut the play. Brennan Presley out of Oklahoma State. After the catch, skilled footwork, and he works around and over tacklers. He's determined and creative for his size. Now, his hands are good enough to compete for a role in the offense right now, but he does fight the ball more often than what you'd see with a professional slot receiver. I think also, like Arian Smith, Presley's hands are too wide at the fingertips, and this is the root cause of his battles with targets. Tennessee's Brew McCoy. McCoy's a good blend of power, contact balance, and agility. He'll get yards after the catch, and if the opponents are sloppy with pursuit angles and tackling, McCoy will make them pay. He kind of reminds me of a blend of Hakeem Nicks and Juju Smith-Schuster when both were young players and still had enough long speed to win against cornerbacks when isolated one-on-one with the backside of a formation. Chimere Dike of Florida, if Dike becomes more aware of how to vary pacing and aspects of receiver play that require it, he could become a good NFL starter. His current skills as a pass catcher, ball carrying, special teams guy is going to make it worthwhile for an NFL team to see if DK can make this a reality. Minnesota's Daniel Jackson. Jackson has the elements of a tough slot receiver who's just fast enough to get time as a flanker. He's a strong route runner with short area explosion who gets separation inside and outside against man and zone coverage. Now, after the catch, Jackson has good feel for pursuit, and he maintains a downfield mentality while routinely making the first man miss with efficient moves. To me, he's like a modern-day Wayne Crabette with hands manufactured at Hoover's top-secret laboratory. Daquan Felton, Virginia Tech. Felton's a physical receiver. He just lacks the bend we see from a player at the top of his comparison archetype. And that player at the top of his comparison archetype is Nico Collins. Felton, he executes setups well, but his breaks have to be sharper for him to win against man coverage on timing routes. And if that doesn't happen, his value could be restricted to really being a zone guy or a size mismatch receiver on angle routes that break to the boundary or cross field. Think sail routes, corner routes, deep over routes, things like that. Back shoulder fades. Now, Dominic Lovett of Georgia. When Lovett has an option to split defenders as a ball carrier and get downhill or just continue east-west and take on a cornerback, he sacrifices the yardage and keeps going east-west thinking he can outflank the faster defender. He has to adopt a better downhill mentality in the open field when he doesn't have blockers to help him. He tries too hard to make a move to avoid one defender who has a favorable pursuit angle rather than working downhill into multiple defenders, even if the odds of him getting more yardage is higher working downfield toward the traffic. So that's something he's going to have to mature on. Tennessee's Donta Thornton. Thornton's got to develop a better release game. Now, without it, he'll continue to play slower on the field than he looks running sprints. Thornton's range of motion with his footwork isn't believable right now. He's going to have to develop a better range of motion when he's releasing against press coverage or defenders playing off and he's trying to use one of these moves at the top of his stem. Thornton's pacing to set up defenders is good, but he's got to develop some complementary short and intermediate skills in those ranges of the field so that defenders just can't overcompensate to take away the vertical shots. At this point, Thornton doesn't drop his weight nearly enough to win breaks back to the quarterback. And if he doesn't fix this, opponents are just going to play off Thornton and still cut off the target because he's not able to execute as quickly with lackluster technique. Utah's Dorian Singer. Now, he may not come out this year. He's trying to appeal for a 6th year based on a ruling in the courts for something else that ended up relating to his cause. So we don't know whether he's going to be in a supplemental draft or what's going on with him, but I've listed him. He's one of the few receivers in this class who has both a wide array of release moves and performs them with the artistry and craft that just needs to happen in the NFL. He's not a special route runner, but most of his work's technically sound and it's clean, and it just makes it easier for Singer down the line to add to his game when he enters the league. He doesn't need to take steps backward to tear down his game before he can move forward with his development. And that's an important thing. Now, Efton Chisholm III, Eastern Washington. He's going to have to continue working on route setups and breaks. He's a quick athlete, but he's got to leverage every bit of that quickness to his advantage if he wants to develop into a reliable route runner at the NFL level. Chisholm's a patient open field runner. He presses blocks tight upon approach of them, and then he gets the defender into the blocker before bouncing or cutting back. And he'll press multiple times into the same down field block just to turn pursuit around and ultimately work past that pursuit without even using any stop-start moves. He's kind of slick that way as a runner. Stanford's Alec Iomanor. Iomanor, from releases through the catch point, his game feels like he's a player who too often with his game takes 3 good steps forward and then 1 giant leap backward. Iomanor has effective setups and breaks with timing routes, but he has lackluster execution at the catch point. He clap attacks targets too often. He doesn't attack the ball early enough to prevent defenders from making plays on the ball, and he doesn't generate position to prevent these things from happening. So Iomanor's game has some issues there, and it also short circuits against tight coverage. It's as if he forgets which type of attack he should be using based on the trajectory of the ball when the defender is playing him tight. Florida's Elijah Badger. Badger's releases, stems, setups, breaks, they all have the potential to become pro caliber in quality. They lack the timing and the pacing and flair that's required to bait NFL defensive backs right now. Now, after the catch, Badger's an effective runner. He's got a good blend of speed, agility, quickness, power, and vision. His best intermediate. Badger's best match right now to play immediately is in the short and intermediate passing game, where you have him working a lot of routes that break across the field and then outlet passes that get him into space. He could contribute immediately in this capacity as maybe a 3rd or 4th wide receiver. Emeka Egba. Emeka Egba has starter skills, the Ohio State product. But I think his game's limited to specific roles within an offense. I know my buddy Chad Ryder believes that he can be more than what we saw the past couple years, and that may be the case. He's certainly, I think, a flanker or a future slot receiver, and I think his best work does come in open space. And I think if you matched Egba with linear routes that work across the field and a variety of depths, he's going to deliver a lot of production because of what he does as a runner after the catch. Where I think I disagree with my friend is that Egba, if asked to spend most of his time working timing routes against tight man-to-man coverage and win consistently at the boundary, earning contested catches, I think there might be potential for disappointment. And I think this is the difference between Egba's game and belonging on the same continuum of a guy like Puka Nacua and having the same talents as Puka Nacua. Egba's game is in the same city, but not really in the same neighborhood as Nacua's. I think Egbuka opts for the wrong attack of targets and allows the ball into his frame when there's no need to do so. He's often unprepared to use the correct attack for targets that aren't pinpoint accurate, but reasonably catchable. So I think this behavior is an issue because it impacts his effectiveness with targets against tight coverage and contested plays requiring athletic adjustments. And these are the targets that occur most often against man coverage and timing routes and plays at the boundary. So far, his timing routes lack sharp detail at the break point, and he drifts out of breaks and gives good cover corners the angle to break up targets. So I think he's a good prospect, but I think there's more work to be done than that's what's suggested. I think, again, there's a little logo scouting associated with Ohio State. Gage Larvadain. I don't think I pronounced that right any more than I pronounced Egbuka right. But Larvadain can flip his hips 90 degrees to avoid pursuit in tight spaces, and he spins through contact to continue forward. He's got tight spins, and he only needs a couple quick steps to transition 90 degrees downfield. He layers moves well in succession. He's effective with jump cuts, and he avoids pursuit in close quarters. Sounds like a guy who could begin his career maybe vying for punt return duty, and maybe if with a lot of work he could become a slot receiver in the NFL. Arkansas's Isaac Tesla. Plug Tesla into an offense with 2 to 3 veteran receivers, and a top tight end or a top tight end. And I think Tesla can earn mismatches in the intermediate and vertical game against linebackers, safeties, and nickelbacks who would otherwise hang with Tesla's physical dimensions and explosion. I think he can earn mismatches with them. And these are players who aren't going to be able to hang with them. Linebackers, safeties, and nickelbacks. He'll be too big or too fast. And I think this worked well for a couple of receivers in the past who played for the Steelers and Lions, Chase Claypool and Kenny Golladay. But it only sort of worked because it just works temporarily. Eventually, opposing defenses make these athletic receivers the primary focus, and then the production dips if the players haven't added more to their game than just playing the NFL's version of catch in the park. Because that's really, I hate to make it sound so simplistic, but it's easier when you've got a Juju Smith-Schuster and Dante Johnson, or a Marvin Jones Jr. and Golden Tate opposite you, sandwiching you, and now you've got the mismatches earned as a result of that. I would call this the Claypool-Golladay production privilege. And for Tesla to capitalize on that production privilege that temporarily blinds fans into thinking that their team found a future stud, Tesla's gonna have to make sure that he can do more and address the sloppiness of that's there in his game. In fact, for him to even have this privilege, he's going to have to tighten up his positioning between himself and other defenders in the vertical routes at the boundary, and his attack's going to have to tighten up. If he wants to become a star and really make good on what the perception's going to look like when he executes this Claypool-Golladay pretty pick privilege thing, he's going to need to get better at man-to-man route running. He's made strides thus far at Arkansas in terms of setting up coverage during his stems, but his breaks are going to require a lot more precision and snap. Texas wide receiver Isaiah Bond. Bond has a strong array of releases. He stacks defenders well on intermediate and vertical routes, and he has the long speed of a legitimate deep threat. And this isn't new to anyone who's casually familiar with Bond's game. What's less apparent to many is that Bond's route running against man-to-man coverage is really good. He sets up breaks with a wide array of tools, and he executes precise breaks and works back to the ball. Isaiah Neyor, his latest stop was Nebraska. He was at Texas. Before that, he was at Wyoming. Neyor plays to his size and speed, okay? Big dude, 6'4", 220. He has athletic ability. He's a ball winner. And he has good vertical route running skills. And a lot of those things remind me of Nico Collins. Neyor can play flanker or split end, and I think there's justifications for him to work either position. If the offense matched Neyor to, the offense that Neyor gets prefers explosive ball carriers and space at flanker, he probably won't fit that requirement, but he could be the boundary winner in deep threat at split end. Now, if the team's split end is more like a Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, Neyor could be the T. Higgins-like complement with a game that's more like Collins. J.J. Jones, North Carolina. Jones has good timing with jump up and throughs, but he clap attacks with side-by-side hands position. He executes effective pullbacks toward oncoming coverage, though. So he just has to get better at the catch point of attacking the ball well so that he can do these other things and make the best of it. Jack Beck of TCU. I think the biggest issue with Beck's technique is that he attacks with his hands too far apart when he's using overhand attack, and it leads him to juggling the ball and drops because he's clap attacking. His jump up and through positioning also has to happen earlier on back shoulder plays so that he gets his back to the defender before he attacks the ball. Meeks is what I call a whiteboard player. When everything about a play unfolds is drawn up, Meeks has the skills to execute each step to perfection. But when the play has some unexpected developments or it just doesn't unfold like the whiteboard, Meeks' game is prone to short-circuiting. Whiteboard players are rarely successful long-term starters unless they possess some compensatory athletic factor that earns them matchup advantages. I don't think Meeks is that guy, but he can help a team as a reserve who can contribute situationally. Jacoby George in Miami. If George earns a contributing role early in his career, it's likely going to come in the slot or as an inside receiver in trips alignments. His release work has a variety of maneuvers, but he has to develop some artistry to execute them convincingly, and I think this gets him pinned to the boundary too often. Ja'Cory Brooks, Louisville, former Alabama receiver. Listen, folks, Brooks is like Barney Stinson's brother from How I Met Your Mother, doing that Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton bit, except Rogers and Parton are both good. The duality of Brooks' game is a little more Jekyll-Hyde. Rogers-Parton, Jekyll-Hyde, equally jarring when performed by one person. This is the case with Brooks. When you watch him run routes, you get excited about his ability to release against press coverage, his extra burst to the ball late in a vertical route, and his man-to-man route skills in the short and intermediate passing game. Then the ball hits Brooks' hands, and gradually the horror creeps into your football-loving soul as you watch more and more reps. Late reactions to the football, fading away on jump up and throughs, suboptimal attack positions, clap attacks, focus drops. They're here. Do not go into the light. Stop where you are. Turn away from it. Don't even look at it. Somebody call Dr. Lesh to cleanse Brooks's pass catching. The darkness has enveloped the bright future of a compelling receiver prospect. Brooks is a future starter as a route runner. When he executes with sound technique as a pass catcher, he has moments where he looks like a top prospect. But until he exercises the demons from his pass catching, all we can do is hope and pray. Until then, Brooks is a smaller Marquez Valdez-Scantling with more upside and better routes. Jamal Banks of Nebraska. When facing defenders who square Banks with little or no cushion off the line, Banks has to develop more artistry with his footwork. There's just not enough range of motion or playing with pace to move the defender off his spot, and it means Banks' hand counters aren't going to have any impact. He has too many reps where defenders in the press position win the interaction because Banks can't clear the defender's hands with his counters. Jalen Royals of Utah State. Royals tempos breaks across zone coverage, but he's got to wait to show his eyes until he is past that buzz rollover defender. He shows his eyes too early, and this has shown up multiple times in his tape in 2024, and it shows that he also doesn't know when to settle and when to continue across the field for his quarterback. He'll have a defender who's playing tight man, and then he settles on a route crossing the field rather than continuing across the field on the move, and the quarterback's expecting Royals to continue. So that's something that he's got to work on so that there's not any confusion and interceptions that come in the future. Iowa State's Jaden Higgins. Listen, if Higgins had hand strength, just that was a little better when defenders swat their hands on his hands or the ball, he'd easily be the best pass catcher in this class. As is, he's still an asset. He makes, also he's good with the ball in his hands. He can make multiple unblocked defenders miss in tight space to earn meaningful yardage, and he knows when a straight line and splitting defenders is the best option. At his size, Higgins does a good job with finishing. And when he's wrapped high, he keeps his feet moving through contact. He's got good timing and range with his stiff arm, too, to ward through off reaches. Virginia Tech's Jalen Lane. I'd say Lane is a lot like Mecole Hardman as a prospect. Both of these guys can flip the field as runners. They have deep speed. Neither have been good at the catch point in traffic or against tight coverage. Their games just short circuit. They overthink how to attack the ball, and their existing technique is just too lackluster to hold up against challenges for the ball. And as you've seen with Hardman's career, offenses find a place for his speed. He's made a career as a space player who earns fly sweeps, end arounds, RPOs, screens, crossing routes, over routes, and the occasional vertical shot off play action. And these are the routes where Hardman's speed and ball carrying acumen are more important than route techniques and concepts. These are also the routes where Lane wins too. Jalen Noel, Iowa State. One thing that may hold Noel back from starting early, and there's a lot of skills in his game where he could start early. The thing that could hold him back is release work. He's got a variety of moves, but he has to learn more of them and incorporate some contrast of patience and suddenness to the footwork. So his new maneuvers and old maneuvers have more craft. Jerjuan Newton of Toledo, he catches targets with overhand attack at the earliest window of arrival. That's good. He can attack over his shoulder with underhand or overhand attack. He just leaves his feet unnecessarily for targets. And as a slot receiver, when you leave your feet when you don't have to, you waste time. And defenders can get downfield, and they can cut off your ability to transition downfield, and you have to work through them. When if you didn't leave your feet and caught it while you're on the move, you're accelerating 1 or 2 steps faster than you were when you left your feet. So that's one of the reasons why you don't want to leave your feet unnecessarily. Jimmy Horn Jr., Colorado. Horn has lapses with underhand attack when the targets arrive behind his break path. He ends up clap attacking the ball in those situations. And even when he makes catches with underhand position at the belt line and extends his arms, there's a slight clap on the ball. Now, he can make catches with tighter position without clapping, but they're more the exception to his game right now than the rule. Duke's Jordan Moore. He's got the athletic ability that reminds me of guys like Doug Baldwin and Khalil Shakir, but his hands don't remind me of that. He leaves his feet unnecessarily for targets. Again, he's a slot receiver. Not a great thing, in terms of being able to transition downhill quickly and get yardage. Also, it's a sign of unconfident tracking, meaning that you just don't trust where the ball is going to arrive, and you don't know how to, you don't gauge it right. And tracking might be the root issue with Moore's lapses as a pass receiver overall. He just has too many reps where he doesn't use the attack best suited for the target's trajectory. And when this happens, his hands get too wide and he clap attacks. Now, when Moore's confident with his tracking, he uses the best attack and his hands are tight, and then he makes catches that you'd expect from an aspiring professional. Ole Miss, Jordan Watkins. Jordan Watkins probably has to continue working on his hands. He's prone to using that underhand attack with too many targets where the overhand attack is going to be the difference between a catch and a drop in the NFL. He has good speed. He's a good ball carrier. He might compete for a role on special teams and then continue working at his craft to become more involved in an NFL offense. So he's got a gateway in as a return specialist possibly. Penn State's Julian Fleming. Fleming uses catch and pierce principles, after, where you basically obey the ball and then you get downhill immediately, with catch and pierce, so that you aren't wasting space. But he does waste some space a little bit more because he doesn't turn inside and split multiple defenders when they're there. He tries to take a wide path to the boundary, and he just doesn't have the sudden acceleration from a static position to get away with that. Maryland's Caden Prather. He's sure-handed. He attacks the ball at the earliest point of arrival. He uses the right attack type for the trajectory of the ball, and he wins against contact. Now, most of the time, he does track the ball well, but his positioning can use some work. He sometimes tracks the ball over the wrong shoulder, or the position of his frame is off while he's tracking a target downfield. He doesn't want to turn back to the ball and jump up and through to get it. He prefers to see if he can keep his back to the ball and then make a very dramatic turn while still running downfield, and it's past the point of being comfortable or balanced to be able to do so. So he just has more difficulty staying inside the boundary or making the play in those situations. Keandre Lambert-Smith, Auburn. Good speed, hands, route skills, some skill after the catch. He could contribute to a team in the NFL when he's facing zone coverage. He's going to get open. He'll make the first man miss. He can move the chains and even potentially generate some chunk plays with his legs. And there's growth potential because I think his man-to-man route game is exhibiting improvement with the nuances and craft that make a difference in the NFL. Kelly Akiri, Mississippi State by way of UTEP. He's patient. He's got patience and suddenness embedded into his release packages against man coverage. So there's craft there. He delivers his hands with violence. He combines moves efficiently. And when he earns separation, he stacks defenders at the really every range of the field to control the route. He also uses that pacing effectively when he sets up routes. He knows when to attack full speed, when to slow the pace. He executes breaks with precision. I think all these things make Akiri a promising route runner against man coverage, and his understanding of the triangle of defenders near his routes make him a promising player against zone. He works well with the quarterback when the first break doesn't earn a target. Overall, he's a good technician for a player most people haven't heard of. UCF's Kobe Hudson. I think for Hudson to thrive in the NFL, he's going to have to optimize his precision as a route runner so that he can compensate for his speed, because his speed is really on the borderline between starter and contributor. Hudson has a few setup techniques at the top of his stems that turn defenders around before the break, but he can use these types of techniques for routes breaking back to the quarterback and not just on vertical routes. And he's going to need to because, again, he may be a decent vertical player in the college game, but might be a little more difficult for him in the pro game. He's got to refine his breaks so they're more precise and delivered at full speed. And I think he's missing refined speed breaks and hard breaks in his game. So he's got some work to do as an intermediate and short range receiver. Kanade Mumpfield of Pitt. He has an excellent toolbox of releases and incorporates savvy pacing to bait opposing defenders out of position. And I think this is also true of Mumpfield's setups and breaks. He often manipulates defenders to overrun the stem and earns a lot of separation back to the ball. And really, when you sum that up, this is the magic of quickness, pacing, and deceleration, and body control, and precision for route runners. You know, all those qualities are magic for route runners. Mumpfield has at least maybe, I would put it this way, he has a full toolbox, but he's at least a step or two slower than a lot of the top prospects in this class. The thing is that his timing routes with all these skills create more open space than some of these top prospects can create on just their athletic ability alone. And receiver coaches try to preach this time and time again, ones that know what they're doing. Kyle Williams, Washington State, UNLV. He's at Washington State now. Williams must develop better setups during his stems, and he's got to snap his turns with more frequency during his breaks if he wants to improve his route running against man coverage. And in addition to tightening up his routes, he's got to tighten up his hands so he cuts down on unforced drops as well. LSU's Kyron Lacey. You could probably say Lacey's game overall is almost there for him to become a good route runner and pass catcher. He's a capable receiver who can get better, and if he works on his positioning before the catch point, he can box out defenders before he attacks the ball. Now, if Lacey's dedicated to his craft, he could emerge as, say, a Noah Brown type, a possession receiver who can do the dirty work over the middle and zone coverage. Now, Lacey may have more explosion than Brown as an athlete, but I didn't see evidence it was enough for him to become a future starter on the outside unless his entire game is razor sharp. And I don't know if they make wide receiver strops. Okay. LeJante Wester, Colorado. I think Wester overthinks the position of his hands when he's attacking targets that take time to arrive and the trajectory is arriving towards his frame. And it leads to him using an attack that isn't really uniform, and then he ends up fighting and dropping the ball. Luther Burden. When Luther Burden's quarterback breaks the pocket, Burden knows when to work back to the passer and when to go downfield and uncover while disguising to the cornerback that the ball is coming. So Burton's positioning between the defender and the ball is timely and effective and savvy. He protects the ball from coverage as soon as he makes a catch. I think he's going to become a quarterback's favorite in the middle of the field and in the red zone because of how well he scrambles, uncovers, and earns position to win the ball. And then after the catch, Burton is one of the two best runners in the open field in this receiver class. Texas's Matthew Golden. He attacks the ball at its earliest window when it arrives at the numbers. He can turn behind the break path, catch the ball with overhand position away from his frame, and he transitions downhill, obeying the ball in one smooth motion. Golden's good at tracking the ball from one shoulder and rotating his body around to the opposite side when the ball's arriving. Good hand-eye coordination. Baylor's Monterey Baldwin. He's a screen, RPO fade, deep over type of receiver who plays outside when given short targets when it's the extension of the run, and then he's inside when running anything else. He's got big play value as part of a 4 or 5 receiver set and can do some work on special teams in the return game. Nick DeGennaro of Richmond, formerly of Maryland. DeGennaro uses a long break step in the short hitches. He drops his weight well into 3-step breaks with long break steps, and he works back to the ball. I think he can improve his breaks even more if he accelerates into the top of those stems. And he does have flat drive and line steps when he works short in and short outs. He has good route running as a short area receiver. He can get better in the intermediate game if he can really accelerate into those breaks at the top of his stem. Nick Nash, San Jose State, former quarterback turned receiver. He's a good route runner. Really effective short area acceleration and change of direction quickness. The long speed, it's kind of at the bottom range of starter value as a flanker. One of the promising aspects of Nash's game is his release work at the line of scrimmage. Nash has a wide variety of maneuvers, and he combines many of them with the appropriate balance of patience and suddenness that baits defenders out of position. And once Nash is into his route, he understands the value of setups, and he really only needs to make some tweaks to become adept at all of those setups. Illinois' Pat Bryant. I think he's got skills with setting up and executing breaks. This is usually the difficult part of route running, but he does that well. And that's really valuable for a receiver who lacks top-end speed like Bryant. Bryant does have good acceleration, and I think he's going to do much of his work within 30 yards of the line of scrimmage. So if he can develop the same nuance with his releases as he shows with his setups and breaks, he could become an equally adept route runner against man and zone coverage and possibly contribute. Oklahoma State's Rashad Owens. Owens repeatedly gets knocked off his line from press defenders, and it derails his routes. His releases need a contrast between patience and suddenness and have that pacing that he plays with to be effective. Ricky White, UNLV. White has the fundamentals needed to become a strong route runner, and most of the refinement ahead for White is about pacing and holding certain tactics longer so he really baits defenders, and then tweaking small details that can optimize his breaks. The thing that's probably most important for White to address before August arrives is his attack of the football. His hands just get too wide, and he's prone to clap attacks. Auburn's Robert Lewis. After watching Lewis at Georgia State before he arrived at Auburn, and then watching his Auburn tape, I wondered if his draft stock would have been different if he transferred somewhere other than Auburn. I just thought Auburn underutilized Lewis. He's a quick-twitch athlete. He has compelling route skills, reliable hands, and he's dangerous after the catch. And I think there's some artistry with his stems and his releases and breaks that you don't see from a lot of prospects. He's got open field prowess as a runner. I think he could compete for a return role early in his career, and it might gain him a foothold on an active roster because he also has that fundamentally sound receiving and route game to build on. Interesting player who's probably going to be competing for a UDFA spot. Rock Taylor of Memphis. He's got the physical skills to become an adept route runner against man and zone coverage. And I think his lapses with catching the football are correctable. So if he makes those corrections, I think Taylor could accelerate his game and become a high-performance flanker who can win along the boundary and over the middle. But he's going to need some help to find his way there. And that's a little easier said than done. The clap attacking with this game may never completely go away, but I think, if it can be Cortland Sutton-like, you could live with that. Samuel Brown of Miami. I would say Romeo Doubs is the refined version of what Samuel Brown could be with a lot of work and a lot of luck. The positive side of that truth is that if Brown wants to become a better wide receiver, he has more to learn than he has to unlearn. And this is true with a lot of facets of his game. He's got release moves. They just lack the artistry to make them sing. He can fly past defenders, but he's got to learn how to stack them. He even has effective setup techniques during his stems. He just has to learn more of them. You get the idea of what I'm talking about here with Brown. Savion Williams, TCU. Williams makes difficult clutch catches, and he makes the easy catches too. So if he remains a wide receiver in the NFL rather than the running back that teams are working him out a little bit to consider, I think it could work out. But I think that when Williams does remain a receiver and he drops the ball, you're going to hear armchair logo scouting everywhere. They're going to think of guys like Jalen Reagor and Quentin Johnston and Dotson and the folks like that, and they're going to say they don't have good NFL receivers at TCU. Just leave that foolishness alone. It's like trying to argue with a drunk flat earther. Williams' lapses are easier to correct than what we saw with Johnston. Now, after the catch is where Williams' career could really go in an entirely different direction. I think he's one of the two best ball carriers at the receiver position in this class, along with Burden. And what Williams can do with the ball in his hands is unique to any receiver or tight end this year. It's also unique? The RSP pre-draft, post-draft publication. It's the goods, $21.95. 20 years in the business doing this. And it's not just, fantasy players that get the RSP. It's quarterback coaches. I've done work with guys like Will Hewlett and Tom Gormley at Cortex. They've worked with Brock Purdy. They've used my scouting reports pre-draft to kind of compare notes and look at film and get their work together to work with guys like Purdy, Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson, folks like that. So you got that. You got media who looks at it, and I know from media who talk to and also college football recruiters like Alex Brown at Ole Miss. He'll tell you that NFL people also look at the RSP. It's one of the two most purchased draft guides as a cross-reference resource that are purchased by NFL people. So yeah, good product. If I say so myself, it's not perfect, but we're continually trying to. I continually try to improve this product all the every year, and try and look at the best ways that I can continue to learn to evaluate players to the best of my ability. So again, you can go to mattwaldman.com, get a pre-draft, post-draft version of this, both for $21.95, and when it's ready, I'll email you. And it probably will be ready. It will be ready April 1st. If it's ready before, you'll get an email that'll let you know how to download it. All right, Silas Bolden. Gadget option, special team speedster. I think an offensive coach could use him on slow developing deep routes that work across the middle of the field with a play action component or misdirection that manipulates defenses so that you can get Bolden running in wide open space. And when this happens, he's going to do the rest of the work with his his return skills. Give Bolden screens and RPOs and routes that I just described above, and I think he's got the hands to do the job. But asking him to run timing routes against tight man coverage and earn targets in contested situations with aerial flair, I think that's where the potential deal breaker exists. Maryland's Ty Thelton. Ty Felton is a high ceiling prospect with a trapdoor leading to a deep, deep drop. He's speedy, a lot of skills as a route runner. He's got a wide array of release maneuvers and route setups, but he's got to refine the smaller details so he can execute everything with precision and believability. And that's not even the trapdoor. The trapdoor is all the different ways Felton knows how to drop a ball. That's the thing he's got to fix. Ted McMillan, Arizona. McMillan's releases need more craft. Okay, he's got a lot of maneuvers in his toolbox, but almost none of them have that contrast between patience and suddenness that beats NFL press man coverage. He's also got to have a better plan before the snap than what he shows right now. And he's got to have some alternatives so when he's facing a defender who's playing leverage that he didn't expect or that isn't good for the route plan that he had, he can adjust to it. Right now, he gets pinned too easily at the boundary because he's too goal-focused on sticking with the bad plan. Now, if the leverage of the defender is different than what he planned to attack, he's just got to adjust or it's just a losing proposition. And I would say if McMillan didn't have lapses with clap attacks, he'd have an elite score as a pass catcher, and he'd be among the best pure receivers in his class. He certainly has great highs with his pass catching, but he clap attacks a variety of targets, and the core issue may have to do with him extending his hands in directions that require significant adjustment while accounting for a defender. If he can address that, he could be pretty unstoppable at the catch point. Oregon's Tez Johnson. While the thought of a middle linebacker squishing the 154-pound Johnson like a cicada hitting the windshield of a tractor trailer on a Florida highway might scare off a lot of NFL teams and depress his draft capital with others, I want to look back at a player who played a difficult role in one of the most dangerous parts of the game during its most vicious era. Alex, who's Gerald McNeil? Known as Ice Cube, McNeil earned a Pro Bowl bid as a return specialist in 1987. He had 728 return yards and 2 touchdowns, and he handled both kickoffs and punts for the Cleveland Browns. And the funny thing about McNeil's rookie year was he had much better seasons, including a combined 1,366 yards and 87 total return on 87 total returns. This was his best season and it was as a rookie. He was 3 yards shy of 1,000 yards as a kick returner that year. Now, McNeil, he played 5 years in the NFL, and he only missed 4 games. And all 4 games came in the same season, which was his Pro Bowl season. Ice Cube averaged 897 yards per season and had 4 seasons with at least 700 return yards. McNeil's listed height and weight on ProFootballReference.com, 5'7", 145 pounds. It's reported that he likely played at a weight above 150 pounds, but not much more than 150 pounds. He was a second-round pick in the 1984 supplemental draft. Returning punts and kickoffs in the 80s and 90s was different than working the middle of the field on offense in 2024. It was far more dangerous. Pass defenders rarely get more than a runway of 15 to 20 yards into a hit over the middle. Kick coverage earned double that runway with a lot more reps. So in today's spread-out NFL with lighter defenders and emphasis on player safety, I'm open to the idea that Johnson's weight won't be the problem the media is making it. And I'm also open to the idea that players will have difficulty getting the kind of hit on Johnson that'll debilitate him. And when I think of Ice Cube McNeil's career, it's just difficult to me, for me to be as concerned as others about Johnson. Theo Weiss Jr. Weiss leaves his feet unnecessarily to catch targets just above his helmet. He can track the ball over his shoulder and overhand position on shallow routes. He can even make catches with one hand high and away from his frame. But he's got to improve his tracking and timing with jump up and through positioning. Torrey Holton at Colorado State, I think he's got enough baseline skills to easily progress from reserve territory to contributor territory. And I think that as a result of that, he can probably also address the sloppy breaks that he has and get into a higher tier in the RSP's rankings. And if he does that and addresses his problematic technique as a pass catcher, he could climb into maybe the rotational starter tier. And if he has balance commensurate for his size, maybe even the low-end starter tier. So there's a lot of places he could improve. I don't think he's going to prove all of these things, but there's a chance. Travis Hunter of Colorado, legitimate playmaker who blends good technique and conceptual knowledge of the position with his excellent athletic ability and creativity. Now, if he doesn't begin his career as a full-time receiver, there's still a chance he's going to end it as a receiver. We'll see. I mean, as good as a cover corner as he is, he's probably also not as good against cover corners at the line of scrimmage. He's got a variety of moves as a receiver, and many of them work well because he can incorporate some pacing and pacing variation into the process, and he baits his opponents well. But he's got to develop this detail with all of his releases, not just some of them. And he also needs to be more selective about the moves he uses against off coverage when playing outside. Bad choices, like in terms of the selection of routes that Hunter has used, has gotten him pinned to the boundary. Trey Harris has a variety of route setups, but he doesn't apply them with the expertise that he has. That's probably going to be as convincing to NFL defenders. I mean, right now they're not so convincing to college defenders. One thing that could help is if Harris attacks his stems with a little more ferocity and executes with precision and snap that's often missing with his routes. It's just one, that precision and snap and the urgency are the biggest differences between Harris probably being a contested catch and zone option and becoming a contested catch and zone option who is also a strong man-to-man route runner. Will Shepard, Colorado, he could help an NFL team maybe as a zone receiver early in his career if he could add more nuance to his setups of coverage during his stems. If he improves the precision and the sharpness of his breaks, he has some burgeoning skills at the catch point that could give him value as a flanker or a slot flanker hybrid who can win matchups against man coverage. Winston Wright Jr., formerly of Florida and at ECU. Wright, he creates a friendly target to the quarterback. He has a drop and pop break that needs a little more weight drop, but he has effective weight drop and a three-step breaks and works back to the ball. So the potential for him to become a shallow and intermediate route runner with good skill is there, especially when his speed outs are also flat, and he snaps his turns well too. So there's some detail that's there. It's just not always there, and I think that, fortunately, he's shown enough of it that he can make that jump. Xavier Guillory of Arizona State. Guillory's got reliable hands. He's physical after the catch. He has good footwork and patience in traffic. He plays bigger than he is. Right now he lacks advanced route work, but he could contribute early as an outlet receiver on crossers, over routes, the occasional seam route, and he shines as a blocker. He works with intensity. He sustains his effort. Put him in an offense like the Chiefs, and he could have a supporting role with the ground game as a stalk blocker and an outlet receiver. And if he doesn't do that right away, he can begin as a special teams ace and grow into it. Miami Xavier Restrepo. I would say there's a short-term concern for his pass catching, and that's that when the targets aren't pinpoint, his technique breaks down. Targets arriving high and away or low and behind Restrepo short-circuit his attack technique, and he resorts to clap attacks that lead to drops. When he earns the ball and transitions downhill, though, Restrepo's shifty. He's patient. He's mature as a decision maker, and thanks to his size, he's a little more powerful than the average small slot option. Xavier Henderson does a lot of good work as a pass catcher, but he has lapses with clap attacking and using the correct attack, and position himself to keep the opponent from making a play on the ball. That almost sounds like saying he's he's good at this, but he's not. But here are all the reasons why he's not good. But I would say this: there may be a lot of reasons that he has some issues to clean up, but they're all couched between successful work with catchable targets that require good body control and toughness against contact. Zachary Franklin. Franklin's developed some release packages that have artistry with pacing that can properly bait a defender. He didn't show that so well last year at Ole Miss, but he was also playing hurt. Now he's at Illinois. He showed a lot more of that. And I think if Franklin can accelerate a little bit more into the top of his stems and drop his weight deeper, he can make his route setups and breaks more fluid. And I already think they're moving in the right direction. So I think there's potential for him to become an effective route runner against man-to-man in the NFL. Well, that's it. April 1st, folks, mattwaldman.com, $21.95 when you sign up. I'll get you an email when it's ready for download. Thanks again. We'll be doing running backs next.